Story 1. This is my story about a pirate attack near the Gulf of Somalia, a night that will stay with me forever. We were a small crew, just 6 of us, running cargo from Djibouti to Mombasa. The waters near the Gulf of Somalia had a reputation for being dangerous, but we'd done this run before. We knew to stay alert, avoid obvious pirate zones, and move quickly. Still, that part of the world is unpredictable. It was getting dark, and we were about 2 days into the journey when we first spotted the boat. At first, we didn't think much of it. It was far off on the horizon, just a speck against the setting sun. But the captain knew better. "That's not a fishing boat," he muttered, eyes narrowing as he pulled out his binoculars. The tension in his voice was enough to set us all on edge. We were in international waters, but that didn't mean anything around here. Within minutes, the boat was closing in fast. Too fast for it to be anything but trouble. We radioed for help, but we knew it would be too late if they made their move. The nearest military vessel was hours away, and we were on our own. The boat was a skiff, small but powerful, and we could now see the men on board, armed to the teeth. The captain shouted orders, and we all scrambled. I could hear the engine roaring as we tried to pick up speed, but deep down, I knew it wasn't enough. These pirates had a way of getting close, and there wasn't much we could do to outrun them. My heart was pounding in my chest, and the air was thick with fear. We were in the middle of nowhere with no one coming to help. The skiff pulled alongside us, and before I knew it, they were firing warning shots. The sound of gunfire echoed across the water, sharp and deafening in the quiet night. They were shouting something in Somali, voices loud and aggressive. We couldn't understand them, but the message was clear: stop or we die. The captain made the decision to slow down. There was no point in getting us all killed. We hoped that maybe, just maybe, they'd take what they wanted and leave us alive. But nothing about their approach gave me any confidence in that. I watched as they threw grappling hooks over the side, climbing aboard with alarming speed. There were 5 of them, faces covered, guns pointed at us. One of the pirates, the leader, stepped forward, barking orders at the captain. He waved his AK-47 in the air as if to punctuate every word. The rest of the pirates spread out, rummaging through our ship. I kept my head down, trying not to draw attention. My hands were shaking, and I was doing everything I could to stay calm. I'd heard stories of what they did to crews: kidnapping, torture, ransom. I try not to think about it. They took everything: our cargo, our navigation equipment, even some of our personal belongings. But it was when they finished looting that the real terror set in. The leader looked at us, eyes gleaming in the dim light, and for a moment, I thought he was going to order our execution. He raised his weapon, pointing it directly at the captain's head, finger resting on the trigger. I held my breath. This was it. I could feel it in my gut. I thought about my family, about how they'd never know what happened to me. I could barely hear anything over the pounding of my heart. And then, the leader laughed. It was a cold, cruel laugh, the kind that makes your skin crawl. He said something to his men, and just like that, they left. No explanation, no reason. They climbed back into their skiff, taking everything with them. We were left adrift, helpless in the middle of the ocean, alive but shaken to the core. The attack lasted maybe 20 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. It was hours before we got a signal out, hours before we were rescued. But the real terror stayed with me long after that night, knowing that in those waters, survival is never guaranteed. You can be prepared, you can be cautious, but out there, you're at the mercy of whoever has the bigger gun. And sometimes, you don't get that lucky. Story 2. It was supposed to be a routine trip. The sea was calm, and everything was going according to plan. We'd been out fishing all day, and by nightfall, we were heading home, tired but satisfied with our haul. There's something peaceful about being out there, just the sound of the waves and the engine humming. But that night, I felt a tension I couldn't shake. As we headed toward the first navigational flag, one we'd always relied on to mark our route home, it didn't appear. I didn't want to say anything at first. I've been at sea long enough to know things go wrong. But when the second flag failed to show up, that's when the knot in my stomach tightened. We couldn't see a thing beyond the boat's lights, and the stars had disappeared behind a thick cloud cover. It felt like the ocean had swallowed us whole. The captain was growing uneasy, too. I could see it in his eyes. We were lost, no doubt about it. The compass said we were on course, but it didn't feel right. We pressed on, and after what felt like hours, we finally spotted a marker up ahead. But as we got closer, the relief I expected didn't come. The flag was old, so frayed and faded that it looked like it had been abandoned years ago. How could that be? This wasn't right. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Still, we had no choice but to continue. We were too far out to turn back, too far gone to call for help. The radio had cut out long ago. We just kept going, hoping we'd find our way. But the more we sailed, the more I felt like we were trapped in some kind of loop. Every direction felt like it was leading us deeper into the darkness, with no way out. Then we saw the light, a strange, flickering glow in the distance. At first, I thought it was another boat, but something about it made my skin crawl. It didn't move like a boat, and as we got closer, I realized why. It wasn't a boat at all. It was fire. A small, wrecked vessel was floating there, burning slowly, and just off to the side were 3 men clinging to what was left of it. One of them was unconscious, the others barely holding on, their faces pale and twisted in terror. We scrambled to help, pulling ropes and preparing to haul them aboard. But just as I reached out to grab the nearest man's arm, they vanished. Gone. The wreck, the fire, the men, all of it disappeared, like it had never been there in the first place. We all just stood there, frozen. No one spoke. How could we explain it? We saw them. I felt them. But they were gone. The captain snapped us back to reality, yelling to head home. We turned the boat around and made for shore as fast as we could. The whole ride back, I couldn't shake the feeling that those men, their hollow eyes, their desperate grip, were still with us. Watching. Following. By the time we docked, I was shaking. I didn't talk about it for days. But the image of those men, their lifeless faces, haunted me. Even now, I can't explain what happened out there. I've spent years on the ocean, faced storms and near-death experiences. But that night was different. I don't know if we saw ghosts or if the ocean played some cruel trick on us. All I know is that it's something I'll never forget. That night, we weren't just lost at sea. We were lost somewhere far darker than that. Story 3. This one's from a deep-sea diver who shared his experience from a dive he'll never forget. We had been prepping for this dive for weeks. An exploration into an area of the Pacific Ocean so remote and deep that few have ever ventured there. I was excited, but also a little on edge. There's something about the deep that's both beautiful and terrifying. The thought of being so far from the surface in total isolation was thrilling, but it also weighed on me. I wasn't sure what to expect. The descent was smooth at first. The water around me grew darker and colder with each meter I dropped, the surface eventually vanishing into blackness above me. All I could hear was the sound of my own breathing, the hiss of oxygen mixing with the heavy silence. I'd been on deep dives before, but this felt different. The pressure here was immense, and my spotlight barely pierced the water as I descended into the abyss. When I finally reached the seafloor, it was like landing on another planet. The landscape was barren, just endless stretches of rocks, sand, and the occasional sea creature darting away from my light. It was eerily quiet. The plan was to map the area, collect samples, and head back to the surface within a few hours. But that's when things started to go wrong. A crackle in my comms broke the silence. The voice from the ship above was faint, almost as if it was being scrambled. "Everything all right down there?" I heard them ask. I answered, but there was no response. The line went dead. Alone in the dark, I checked my equipment. Everything was working fine. But the radio, it was like someone had cut the line. I was on my own. That's when I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, something moved in the distance. At first, I thought it was a shadow, a trick of the light, or maybe a large fish. But it was too slow, too deliberate. I turned my light toward it, and for a second, nothing. Just darkness. I started to relax, thinking my mind was playing tricks on me. Then it moved again. It was massive, something I couldn't fully comprehend at first. A shape, long and serpentine, gliding along the seafloor, its skin shimmering faintly in the light. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It was coming toward me, slowly, like it was stalking me. My light flickered as I tried to get a better look, but the moment I shone it directly on the creature, it disappeared, vanished into the dark like it had never been there. I felt my heart racing, the weight of the water pressing down on me. I've faced sharks, rough currents, even close calls with equipment failure, but nothing felt like this. I wasn't supposed to be down here alone. I wasn't supposed to see something like that. I tried to shake it off and focus on the mission. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe the pressure was messing with my head. But the deeper I ventured, the more that feeling of being watched grew. I couldn't shake it, the sense that something was out there, following me, just beyond the reach of my light. Suddenly, there was movement all around me. My light flickered again, and in that brief moment, I saw them, more of them. These strange, elongated shapes moving just beyond my vision, circling me. I felt my throat tighten. I turned, trying to get a clearer look, but every time I moved the light, they'd vanish. I decided to head back to the surface, not wanting to test my luck. But as I ascended, something happened that chilled me to the core. I felt a tug on my leg. Something brushed against me. I kicked hard, my panic spiking, and whatever it was let go. But as I looked down, my spotlight revealed nothing. No fish, no creature, no explanation. The ascent felt like an eternity. I kept glancing behind me, expecting to see that thing again, but the water stayed empty. When I finally breached the surface, gasping for air, the crew looked at me like they'd seen a ghost. I never told them what I saw. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane. But whatever it was, I know one thing for certain. There's something down there in the deep. Something we're not meant to see. Story 4. This is a terrifying account of a naval experience during World War II, told from the perspective of a sailor who lived through it. We were in the middle of the South Pacific, deep in enemy waters, on a destroyer escort meant to patrol for submarines. Our mission was simple: protect the convoy, locate any threats, and make it to the rendezvous point without incident. The war had already dragged on for years by then, but that night, it was something none of us were prepared for. The sea was eerily calm, almost unnaturally so. Not a single wave broke the surface, and the moon hung low, casting a sickly glow over the water. It felt like we were floating on a mirror, everything too quiet. I was stationed topside, keeping watch with a couple of the other men, when I noticed something strange on the horizon. A ripple, just barely noticeable, like something moving beneath the surface. I called out to the officer on duty, who glanced over and shrugged it off. Could have been anything, maybe a whale or a school of fish. But something in my gut told me it wasn't. I kept my eyes glued to that spot, watching, waiting, and then there it was again, a shadow, long and serpentine, gliding just below the surface, moving faster than any submarine or sea creature I'd ever seen. I pointed it out again, and this time the officer saw it too. We sounded the alarm. The whole ship went on high alert, scrambling to figure out what it was. Sonar picked up nothing, no enemy submarines, no mines, nothing. And yet, we could all see it now. A dark shape, massive, circling beneath us, just out of range of our depth charges. The captain ordered us to slow the ship, hoping it might be some sort of mechanical issue, or a misreading on our part. But that was a mistake. As soon as the engines died down, the water around us seemed to churn, like something huge was stirring beneath. Then came the noise, a low, guttural sound, like metal groaning, echoed up from the deep. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard. The whole ship vibrated with it, and for a moment I thought we'd hit something. But the depth meters showed clear water below. We were still fine, at least according to the instruments. Suddenly, there was a splash off the port side. One of the sailors screamed, pointing into the water. My heart dropped. There, floating in the sea, was a life raft, a battered, torn-up raft, drifting slowly toward us. The captain ordered a crew to retrieve it, and when they brought it aboard, we all froze. The raft wasn't empty. Inside were the remains of a man. What was left of him, anyway? His face was bloated, his eyes wide open, his skin waterlogged and torn as if something had been gnawing on him. But that wasn't the worst part. His dog tags were still around his neck, and when the captain read the name, he went pale. The man had been a sailor from a ship that had gone down over 2 weeks ago, miles from where we were. There was no way that raft could have drifted here, not in this condition, not this fast. Then, the water around us started to bubble. Whatever had been circling us wasn't done yet. We tried to fire off depth charges, but they did nothing. The shape beneath us, whatever it was, stayed lurking, watching. We all felt it, this sense of impending doom, like we were being hunted. And then, without warning, the noise came again. This time louder, closer, and the ship lurched. We scrambled for cover as the hull creaked and groaned, and that's when we saw it. Just for a moment, as the moonlight hit the surface of the water, we saw the outline of something huge, a monstrous, writhing shape that disappeared almost as quickly as it had appeared. It wasn't a sub, it wasn't a mine, it was something else, something far older, far deadlier. The captain ordered full speed ahead, and we bolted. I don't know how we got out of there, or why the thing didn't drag us under, but we made it to the rendezvous point by morning. I've never spoken about it since. None of us have. But to this day, I can't get the image of that creature, that noise, out of my head. There's something out there, something in the deep, and it's waiting. If you enjoyed these stories, please like and subscribe. Also, check out my other videos.